Ciao. I didn't even really want to have to do this video, which is why it's a tiny bit late, because I'm disappointed. Like, I said a lot in my first part where it was just like, I had high hopes and the video was giving different teas than I thought it would give. Like, because typically, and again, let me just start this by saying this is not a read. You know what I'm saying? It's not a read on Miss Nene or Carlos, but typically, when you listen to them speak separately about the Real Housewives of Atlanta and their experience on there versus how it is now, it always seems to be a read. Like, very critical, very, like, almost bitter, like, sometimes. And so, seeing them come together to do an interview at the outset prior to part one felt like, oh, this could be like a thing. Like, this could be a moment to take away from the show and criticize the show and make it seem like the show is nothing without us. But part one didn't give that. And so I was very optimistic. And then part two just kind of went down the drain. So it took me a minute to even watch it. And then Twitter was a twittering, and they were just reading Miss Nene down, honey. And then it made its way over to social, like Instagram. So it was just like, whew. So I'm like, okay, well. So, I finally watched it. I believe I watched it yesterday. And yeah, I'll say this. I just feel like, and another one of my friends said this, who doesn't even necessarily follow the whole Nene and the Carlos of it all, so it was interesting to me. And when I have like these adverse opinions about stuff that I had really high hopes for, I tend to want to swallow them and not say it. So I was holding on to this opinion until my friend texted it to my phone yesterday. And he was like, I kind of want to read it verbatim. But he basically said, like, it felt like, a scheme set up by Ty, right? Like, it just felt like they came together purposely, like they had spoken before, and like this was just a thing to be able to, like I just said, kind of say like, oh, the show's terrible, and kind of create a moment outside of the show to create more negative commentary about the show. That's what it felt like. And I was sitting on that opinion until my friend texted to me yesterday. So here we are. And yeah, it just sometimes, even from a lot of the tweets that I saw as well, because like I said, it took me a while to make the video. Even from a lot of the tweets that I've been seeing, not even looking at like hashtags and stuff, like they'll just pop up on the timeline now because it's occurred and the tweets are out there. And, algorithms and things like that. So there are tweets that are just like, they kind of give like disgruntled ex-employees vibes. And like, you can get the impression that neither one of them are happy about their exit from Roa for whatever reason. Nene we know more of than Carlos. So it just seems like they both have some type of something against the show. And it's rearing its head like repetitively. So, I think I'm rambling because I'm feeling some type of way, but we're gonna get into it and it'll work its way out. And I'll try my best not to make this video long, but it's pretty long. They started out with Nene acknowledging that she had a close relationship with the network and how, when they started, it was a much smaller production and she was able to like talk to excuse me if I'm getting the titles wrong, but basically like talk to the president of the network and things like that, the top executives, personally. She could call them, text them, whatever, and it's not really that anymore. Bravo has really blown up, and now you got to get to people type of thing, and that makes sense, and I can understand that. And she was basically highlighting that to say, things had changed, and basically from there, it just kind of felt like, from what I interpreted what she was saying, it just kind of felt like she was getting pushed back and she didn't necessarily have that relationship with them, which I think that she understood and anybody will understand, but it almost felt like to me she was speaking on a little bit of a sense of entitlement. And she didn't say this, but the way that I was interpreting it was she assumed that her relationship with them was always going to remain the same. And as they made their way up as execs in this network and in this show, she was always going to still be Nene and have that type of relationship with them, I guess, that she had once had. And I think that I think a part of what her issue is is she was still expecting to have those relationships, and she didn't say it, but ultimately I think she was expecting to receive some type of favoritism because of that, right? And I don't know, maybe she doesn't like explicitly know that she was expecting favoritism, because it takes a certain level of self acknowledgement and self awareness that I think that Nene doesn't have, which is what I said in the last episode, which is not a read. Some people are just not as self aware as others. So I think that a part that she's missing is that she was expecting some type of favoritism on this show because she came, out the mud from the gutter. And it's like, I can't fault her in principle for feeling like that. But when you take a step back from that thought and you realize what you're asking for, I think that she will realize that that's unreasonable. And if that's how she's defining the unfairness that she talks about a lot, I wouldn't agree that that's unfair. Because at the end of the day, it's an ensemble cast, and I don't care how long you've been here, you still work for those people, and it's still a corporation, and those are your bosses at the end of the day, and they just don't necessarily owe you a kiki. You know what I'm saying? They're not your friends, they're your bosses. So that's my opinion on that. She then goes into talking about how, I guess in connection with or without this connection with the execs and production and things like that, she fought for the ladies to stay on the show. And she's spoken about this before. Like she said, after Portia had her physical altercation, I don't know if it was multiple or one, but after one of them at least, she fought for Portia to stay on the show along with Candy. We've heard about that. Allegedly, she fought for Cynthia to stay on the show, and she just feels like, and she fought for Claudia to have a peach, which comes up later, but she doesn't feel like the ladies fought for her. I feel like there is a difference that she's missing here, and it's been a huge thing, right? Because Nene has never understood. There was a huge fight about it. She's had multiple fights about it when she was on the show. One with Portia and one with Cynthia, and they both kind of dragged out a bit. One a little bit more with Cynthia, which I feel like was ultimately their fallout. And it was that thing where, I don't know if it started with Nene, but like on Watch What Happens Live, when Andy would say, well, who do you think deserves to have a peach or continue on the cast? She's been asked that a couple times, and since then it's become like this big question that housewives get asked all the time. And I think that Nene struggles with kind of like Donald Trump syndrome, like freedom of speech, so I should be able to say whatever I want to say. And any adult knows that there's so much power in discernment, and just because it's a constitutional right to say whatever you want to say, those things have consequences. I'm not even going to push back on the principle of, there's a time and place, or you shouldn't say certain things, or even discernment. I'll even take that back. But I think if you're going to lean on the thing of I can say whatever I want to say, then you also need to be open to those consequences. And I don't think that Nene ever has been. And I also don't think that she's understood when I talk about the difference between fighting for somebody to be on the show, right? I wasn't there, so I don't know. But saying that, like, Portia would be good for the show even after she's been in these fights, and, like, basically the specific thing was, like, at the time, I think I remember now, at the time that they weren't really living for Portia, meaning production, was after her first season, and after her first season, obviously, she was going through a divorce. So I believe the story is that Nene and Candy went to production like, well, this girl's going through a divorce. It's a story that you guys can follow. She should be on the show. That's vouching for her for sure, but I don't know that I would say you fought for her. Like, oh my God, Portia has to be on the show. Like, you guys can't do this show without Portia. That's my opinion. I think that there's a difference there. There could have been other instances where Nene did actually fight for Portia to be on the show, but I don't know. And if that's the only instance, I'm just saying there's a difference, I think. And then similarly, like, if that's all she did for Cynthia, like, well, no, like, let Cynthia be on the show. She has a good story to follow. I don't know if I would define that as fight. And then also, those two people are also people that she's gone on record to say that she didn't think they should be on the show when asked by Andy, right? Like, there was an instance where she said frickin' fraud, and she was talking about Phaedra and Portia shouldn't be on the show. And there's an instance where she said Cynthia shouldn't be on the show. So, she's saying both things. You know what I'm saying? And it's hard to feel like, oh, you fought for me to be on the show when you've publicly gone out and said that you don't feel like I should be on the show. And Nene, even in this interview, has always diminished that and felt like, obviously, she specifically addressed it. She's like, obviously we were asked, but, and she said it actually was, ironically, watching some clips with a friend of like old Atlanta fights, and I was kind of like just doing random ones. I really wasn't thinking contextually about it, and I was finding ones that lended themselves to like Nene and what we're talking about now, so they were helpful. I found two in particular, and one was after the whole Phaedra and Portia versus Candy season, and Nene had that whole argument with Portia basically about Portia didn't get held accountable for the Phaedra thing, and Phaedra got kicked off the show, Portia didn't, and the fact that she said that Portia should be off the show. They were having a whole argument about that. I don't know if you guys remember, it's when Nene had on the red shawl with the black fur and her bun kept coming down. The door is closed, that argument. And she specifically said in that argument, like, I never called any execs to get you off the show. I didn't call any higher ups. So she was teetering the line there, because it's like, yeah, but Nene, you went on TV and said that I shouldn't be on the show. I feel like they hold the same weight, at the end of the day. Whether you went to call an executive or not, you're one of the top dogs, the OGs on this show. And if you're asked who shouldn't be on the show, I believe that it holds weight, whether you do or not. So I think that she was trying to diminish that there, but she has publicly said that they shouldn't be on the show. So I don't think she ever grasped the magnitude of that and what that was and what that argument was. And I feel like she got a pass on it because ultimately Cynthia and Portia kind of got over it and we're still cool with her. But I say all that to say I just don't really agree with her argument that she fought for the ladies to be on the show and they didn't fight for her. And then even on alternative, say none of that stuff even exists on her side of things. Nene, for me, I said this last episode, she didn't have a good relationship with the ladies. So, and clearly not a good relationship with production in some capacity. That's why she had that legal trouble and was phased out of the show or whatever. And so at that point, why would anybody be fighting for you to be on the show, right? And I would urge, even Nene, but I would urge people that don't even understand that to go back and watch Nene's kind of like final seasons, 2 or 3 seasons, even the season before her break or whatever it was. And she had that, I think it was the reunion where they were all white for the first time, and the doctor was there, the black guy with the glasses that she kind of got into, and she felt like everybody was ganging up on her. Like, Nene had some really tough final seasons for lack of taking accountability, and that's when she felt like all the ladies were ganging up on her, but it really was like them holding her accountable for her BS that she had carried on for a lot of years. And Nene just didn't know how to take accountability. So Nene really didn't have great last seasons. And that's going to lead me to another one of my arguments, but I'm going to move on. The next thing she talked about, which we already knew, or most of us knew, when she was allegedly fired or phased out of the show, she did her last season, and when she was coming back, they offered her a contract to do 6 episodes. And, Carlos and Nene said, they're understood to do around 20, I guess, per season. And so she just kind of felt like, well, why am I only getting 6 episodes out of 20? Valid question, but also entitlement, right? Because these are your bosses, and if they feel like if that's what they want to give you, that's what they want to give you. I'm not saying that is fair, but at the end of the day, it's their production, it's their company, they're gonna do what they want. And to my understanding, Nene is an at-will employee. At-will meaning that you can be fired or demoted for any reason at all. They don't have to give you a reason. That's what at-will employment is. So, she's also highlighting, she didn't really get a reason besides the fact that they said that she was unhappy. And I saw some discourse about this online, like, well, how are you going to tell somebody they're unhappy? I can agree with that to a certain extent, but I was kind of thinking it before she even said it, because Nene was coming across very unhinged in those last couple seasons, especially in that final reunion that they had on Zoom. Like, she just kind of felt like she couldn't be touched and she couldn't be told anything, and unhinged. Like, so I think that's where the unhappy word comes from, because it did feel like that. Like, she wasn't in a good space, especially not to like be in an ensemble cast and be, a team player and be, like easy to work with at the end of the day. I think it comes down to a question of, do people want to work with you? And I don't know that Nene has considered that. I think that she's so stuck on being entitled because she was there from day one. And she's like, well, how can you offer me 6 episodes? I'm Nene Leakes and all this type of stuff. But it's like, but do people want to work with you at the end of the day? And I think it's obvious that they didn't, and I don't blame them for not wanting to work with her because even as a viewer, again, I wasn't there. I don't know everything. But as a viewer, and as somebody that's been watching since season one and used to love Nene and kind of watched the downfall of Nene's not somebody that I would have wanted to work with, So I don't know that she's considered that, and I think it's something that she's missing. That's just a lot of stuff that I've kind of interpreted because she continues to use this word unfair. I think unfair played a big part in her lawsuit as well. She felt like she was being treated unfairly, but she never clearly defined the fairness thing. I know that a lot hinged on Kim Zolciak, and she felt like there was a difference there, and we'll talk about that. But otherwise, in terms of fairness, I think that a lot of those arguments for her, again, I'm interpreting because she didn't explicitly say, but I think a lot of those arguments for her are like, well, she was expecting a certain type of treatment and she didn't get it, thus it was unfair. And I just don't agree with that. One example that I would agree with is it's not fair that Kim Zolciak didn't go on any of the cast trips with them, and it just felt like she was allowed to do whatever she wanted to do, but the other ladies didn't get that privilege. I can understand that being unfair, but there's no way in hell that that is the sole reason for why Nene's not on the show and had to file this lawsuit. I think that that was the only example that she could pull. At the end of the day, it's a good example. It was kind of like low-hanging fruit. I think it is a good question, but in my opinion, I just don't know that that was the end-all be-all because that had been happening for years, and Nene was on the show several times while Kim wasn't. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like she needed a better example than that, but that's the only one that she had. Something I have an issue with, I think I brought this up last episode. She acknowledged that she doesn't watch the show, but she watches clips that'll come down her timeline. And she proceeds to say things like, well, she thinks from the clips that she's seen, Marlo is the most entertaining. And if that's the case, that's an issue because then, other ladies should be demoted or like Marlo should be getting the other ladies' paychecks if Marlo's bringing the most entertainment on the show. I have an issue with her even making assertions about the current season and maybe what's wrong and who's bringing the most entertainment if she's not actually watching the show, admittedly. So I have an issue with that. There's nothing entertaining about Marlo on the show. Marlo makes an ass out of herself quite constantly. I think anybody can agree with that, whether you like her or not. I just don't think the word, if we're all going to be honest with ourselves, I don't think that the word for Marlo is entertaining. I think that she has funny moments. She always has in the last decade that she's been on the show. But for the most part, Marlo, especially this season, tends to make an ass out of herself. So either she's definitely depending on clips, I guess. I haven't seen any clips that would even lead me to think that. Or she's just choosing to be adversarial and using this as a point to say, well, the show is not good anymore. It then goes on to talk about Candy, something that I ended up tweeting about. I try not to reply to the clips. So there was a clip about Wendy and there's a clip about what she was saying about Candy before I watched it. And I tried, similar to what I'm saying about Nene, I don't agree with making opinions about things until you've seen them in their entirety. So I was trying not to watch the clips and reply to the clips before I watched it. But I saw this clip about Candy and I feel like it's always a topic about Candy. I feel like people are just committed to not liking Candy. If you don't like Candy, then that's fine. You're not going to like everybody. But I think it's asinine to think that, or to state that Candy's not an asset to this show. I think that's just crazy. I can agree with partially what she said, where she's like, she doesn't feel like Candy is the most entertaining on the show. Sure, I can agree with that. But I just don't understand the whole overrated aspect of it all, because at the end of the day, Candy's not the one giving herself this position on the show. Candy's not the one giving herself this job on Housewife. Candy's not the one signing her paycheck. She negotiates her contract and she gets paid what she should get paid because she's Candy Burris on and off of this show. But at the end of the day, when it comes to being overrated, and I also hate those type of arguments because there aren't a lot of people that are vying to be this big star, this big housewife star. Like, I'm the star of Atlanta. You just don't see people walking around doing that besides Nene. You know what I'm saying? Like, has everybody taken a step back and thought about that? Like, there's nobody on the show that's walking around like, I'm the star of this show. Like, I'm the most entertaining. I'm this and I'm that. That's only ever been Nene Leakes. Ever. Like, so nobody's thinking about that, and that's going to lead me to our star versus starless talk towards the end. Like, nobody's vying for that. So I hate when we have that conversation and we're like, well, so and so's not the star of the show, and so's not relevant, and so's not entertaining. I don't think that Candy's going out of her way to entertain y'all. She's doing the job that she's been asked to do, and for whatever reason, she's been asked back continuously for years, and y'all are gonna have to get over it. Like, I don't understand the commitment to, like, saying that she's not good enough to be on this show. You know what I'm saying? Or she's overrated. Like, I just think that sounds crazy, and I think it sounds even more crazy because you're being critical of Candy, who's in the position that you want to be in. Like, Nene can say that she doesn't desire to be on the show, and the only reason she will go back is because of fans, and that's complete bullshit. I mean, I wish I had done the math, but Nene's been off this show for years. So, you know, if it really didn't matter to her, she wouldn't still be talking about it. At the end of the day, she's been talking about it before she had this interview. You know what I'm saying? So she talks about it in a negative light at every chance that she possibly gets, even unprovoked. And so, you know, it's a lie to say that you don't want to be back on this show. And I think it's weird to criticize somebody that has the position that you want. And you don't even have to read between the lines to see that it's there. And it also is disappointing on Carlos's end. Like I was saying, it feels like a disgruntled employee thing, like ex-employee thing. I don't know much about Carlos's exit from the Real Housewives of Atlanta. I think we all know that it occurred after, I think it was season 9, when the whole Candy, Phaedra, and Portia thing happened, and there was some speculation that he was behind the rumor that Portia ended up letting out from Phaedra, and then Phaedra alleged that she got it from a producer, and people thought that it was Carlos. So it's kind of like, it's all speculation, but I don't think anybody really knows. And I also believe that Carlos said he was asked back to do the show after that, but he wanted to go do his own thing, so who knows. But at the end of the day, it just starts to feel like I said, Nene and Carlos have some feelings about the fact that they're not working on that show anymore, and they attribute those feelings to Candy. And it's weird because Candy's there and she's been flourishing and she's just not problematic, right? And it starts to feel so weird. Like, it's always, I feel like Carlos has continuously set up a platform for people to come on and say negative things about Candy. Like, he won't necessarily say it, but he'll do interviews with people like a Nene and like a Sonya and kind of open up the door for them to be shady towards Candy. Like, there's never anything positive said. Like I said, you can have the opinion that Candy's not the most entertaining, fine. But, you know, where is the positive, right? Like, it just comes off very weird at the end of the day. And then if there's no positive at all, then just don't say anything at all. I just don't see why even go there. Besides, again, the general argument, if there's an argument that the girls are not delivering, they're not doing their jobs, they're not entertaining, fine, I will leave it there. But talking about Candy's overrated and this, that, and the third, like, it's just so unnecessary from adults who used to be affiliated with this show, who used to work with the lady. At the end of the day, you guys know Candy used to work with her, and now every possible chance you get, you open up the door to criticize her. It's very hater-ish, and it's weird coming from two grown adults who used to be affiliated with the show. It's just so weird, and it comes off disgruntled. Even at this point, I want to say I'm halfway through the review, and I had noted that everything, because I said Nene lacked self-awareness and acknowledgement, and everything that she was doing was a comparison. Everything. Like, it just, you guys know how I hate that if you watched my videos, especially the last one I did on Atlanta. I just hate comparisons. And I think it's because I was raised that way. Like, whenever things would happen and I would compare myself to other people, my parents would always shoot that down. And it's frustrating because you're like, but it's not fair, blah, blah, blah. But life's not fair at the end of the day. And I just feel like, focus on yourself. And I feel like, if Nene was going to do this interview with Carlos, it should have been about growth and where she is now. And of course, talk about the show and what you think the show could do better, which they got to towards the end, kind of in an impartial way. But at this point, it just felt like a lot of comparisons and a lot of jabs and a lot of, from both of them, a lot of indications that the show is not doing well because they're not there anymore. Like, this show is not doing well because Nene's not there. This show's not doing well because Carlos is not there. And that's just not the approach that you want to take. It just feels so childish. And I don't want to beat a dead horse, but it was just so many points that they brought up that lended themselves to that bitterness. And it was just so disappointing to see because, like I said, I think point one started out so strong. And this part just started to feel very just haterish and weird. It could have just been a more productive conversation. I would have respected it more if they were saying, because it's a different time at the end of the day too. Like, both of them need to stop living in the past and stop, it's always such a petty conversation about the ratings and what was done then versus what was done now. We know that things are different now. We know that they're not great. But at the end of the show, end of the day, if you take a step back, it's not a terrible show. At the end of the day, it's just different. And it's just not what we're used to, but it is what it is. You know what I'm saying? I think changes can be made. And I think that criticisms can be given. That's why I'm here. But I think that you also have to give some type of, like, productive criticism, like, especially if you used to be affiliated and work on the show. I just feel like if you're gonna leave an establishment or be, removed from an establishment, if you don't have anything positive to say about it, inevitably you're gonna look like a hater and you're gonna look weird. And that's what they kind of look like. And it sucks, even like, it's like they start off good on certain arguments, but it just always goes petty. Like, even in, Nene talking about how she feels like the network didn't want the Real Housewives of Atlanta to be number one. It's an interesting concept, right? Because you can read between the lines and consider, okay, she's saying they didn't want the black women to be number one on the network. Interesting, maybe, you know what I'm saying? You might have a point there, but then she goes into the negative of, like, belittling one of her black cast members, Candy Burris, and saying, well, the camera doesn't love her. And, she doesn't know why she and Candy have arguments because they were always petty. And it's like another clip that I watched. When you go back to the reunion, like, I said what I said. It's iconic. But if you listen to the substance of that argument that they were having, Nene was an issue back then, and that was a long time ago. That stemmed from Nene making a public comment off camera, off of the show, like it was like an interview, and she was just like talking about, something that Mama Joyce did, and she's like, I never would have stooped so low in the gutter to blah, 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 whatever Mama Joyce had done. She was like Mama Joyce. And again, just playing with semantics and playing with words when trying to be held accountable. And Candy's just like, you didn't have to mention my mother to make that point. And she just never would be accountable. And she's like, well, I said what I said. It's not changing over here. And even Andy's like, well, you could have apologized. You know what I'm saying? You have to take a step back and realize Candy's going to see this, so there's going to be an issue. That's not a petty argument. Your coworkers are also going to see this. It's not cute. You're a grown woman, and that's not going to make them want to work with you. And the executives and the producers and the people that work on this show are going to see this. And it makes you look bad. And I think that Nene had created this brand off of, again, I can say whatever I want, but you look like an at the end of the day, and you're not able to take the kind of accountability and what comes with saying whatever you want. So Nene has always been contributing to her downfall, but she just doesn't notice it, and it's just so weird to me, right? I feel like there was more being said that may have like dug the hole for both of them, or maybe they were like spilling too much tea because the editing was so weird on part two. Like, they kept snipping so many parts, and I'm like, there's got to be more, because they would literally be getting into a very like ill type of place, and then it would just cut and it would go somewhere else. She also talked about like her being the anchor and the Beyonce of the show. This is something again, started out being substantive, but still just kind of like, because, at the end of the day, yes, she was the anchor of the show, and I do agree that you need certain ingredients for things to work. But I think there's also acknowledgement there to say that was then, this is now. Because it turned negative where she's like, well, they're trying to reinvent it and kind of like make it work, and it just doesn't work. They're trying to put people in that place, and it's just like, they may be trying to do that, and that may be the issue. That's fair, but like, just stop giving yourself so much credit to think that they're trying to reinvent Nene at the end of the day. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. It's just too much patting on the back in this interview. You know what I'm saying? No humility at all. And it's just crazy because it's like, you're not there anymore. And you just kind of got to let that hurt go at the end of the day. And it's clear that Nene has not let that hurt go. They kind of wrap up that segment by saying that the network and the executives basically don't know what the show needs. And I will have to agree with that. I think we all know that. But again, I don't think that that should come with implications. And that's what I hate. And I speak to this all the time. I don't think that it should come with implications that, well, we need Nene, or like we need Portia, or like we need Phaedra back, right? And it's funny because even Nene said that. She's just like, it's not like they need to keep like taking people out of the show and putting them back and taking them out. And she's like, well, why are they back? You shouldn't have taken them away in the first place, right? So it's like, you can't make that valid argument, but then also act like, well, the show's not good because you're not there anymore. You make those implications all the time. And I wish that the public and the viewers would stop doing that too. Like, this show isn't going through what it's going to because Nene is not there. The show had bad seasons with Nene there. The show had bad seasons with Portia there. So we gotta wake up. We really do. She continues to talk about the whole Wendy Williams thing and the friendship that they built. I'm just gonna say, I mean, I wasn't there, but I watched Wendy Williams on the daily, and I watched Real Housewives on the weekly. So I never really felt like it was a friendship. If you ever watched Wendy Williams, she was always very clear that she didn't make like industry friends. She was going to put her job first, and she was always going to spill the tea and do her hot topics. And she didn't want to have close relationships with people because she didn't want that to stop her from giving her real opinion, and she didn't want to bite her tongue. That's the way that she was. And Carlos made a specific reference to when Wendy Williams referenced Nene as that girl over there. And I didn't go back and rewatch, so I can be completely wrong, but I was there when it happened. And from what I remember, I interpreted it as Nene was saying, not Nene, excuse me. Wendy was saying, I'm not going to stop giving my opinion about Nene Leakes. She's on the Real Housewives of Atlanta, and at one point it was airing at the time that they were friends and filming. So it's just like, I'm still going to give my opinion. We're still going to talk about this show. And I believe that she was explaining it as, at the end of the day, like, yeah, we're cool and I kick it with Nene. She's a great girl. But when it comes to my job and me doing what I have to do and analyzing Nene Leakes as it pertains to the Real Housewives of Atlanta, it gives that girl over there, like, it's not like, oh, that's my best Judy, I can't talk about her. Like, no, you're still Nene Leakes over there on the Real Housewives of Atlanta. Again, I could be wrong, but that's how I interpreted it then, and that's how I choose to continue to interpret it now. I didn't take that as disrespect. I could see Nene feeling some type of way about that because I could tell from the way that she spoke. She felt like she and Wendy were closer friends than that, and fine, that's fair. I get that. I could feel feeling some type of way about that, but I think it would have taken more of a conversation to understand where Wendy was coming from. But I think they both have a right to feel the type of way that they do, right? And at the end of the day, Wendy was going to put her job before these friendships. I just don't think it was as deep as Nene thought it was. And Nene's not wrong for feeling that way. But I wouldn't take that stuff personally. That's just me. But I'm not in it, so I can't tell Nene how to feel. But that's the way that I interpret it and the way that I always saw it as it pertains to the Wendy thing. She talks about being blackballed and basically the comparison to, like, she feels like, which came out of the blue for me, I completely missed this, but she feels like she should have been as famous as Kim Kardashian, if not more famous, because they came out around the same time. Well, Nene came out before Kim, and people were pushing Kim and things like that. And again, I can see that, but I think it still lends itself to, are you somebody that people want to work with? And, she was saying, it was coming out of her mouth. She's like, I had this issue with Wendy, and after that, like, podcasts were a no to me. Like, nobody wanted to hire me to do podcasts. Nobody wanted to hire me to do daytime television. Like, none of that. And it's just like, yeah, because at the end of the day, Nene, you have to realize, yes, you're a talent. You can be as talented as you want. There's so many talented people in the world doing anything in any type of industry. You can be as talented as you want. And I'm going to preface this by saying it's not fair, but every industry has a boss. And if that boss or the agents that work with that boss or whoever the powers that be, if they don't want to work with you, they're not going to work with you. Period. Nobody owes you anything because you're Nene Leakes, queen of reality TV, and you have the most memes in the world. I'm sorry. Nobody owes you that. If you're not somebody that seems to be likable and there's somebody that they want to work with, then they don't have to. Now, again, they're judging a book by its cover to a certain extent because they don't know you. They can easily sit down and have a conversation with you and all those types of things as well. So that's where the unfairness comes in. But you also have to look at what you as Nene Leakes have put out into the world for years, how you've acted on Atlanta, how you've shown that you can't show accountability, how even to the present, years after you've been gone from Atlanta, you're extremely negative and critical of it, and you still don't have, you just don't seem to have any accountability in you. You seem to be lighter, but you're not somebody that seems like they can kind of be talked to or talked down or like reasoned with. You just don't seem like that type of person. And when it comes to talent and putting you in a position where you can be a creative and use your mouth, at the end of the day, what Nene wants to do is use her mouth and her personality to express herself, which is awesome. But you can't just put you out there on any type of anything, any type of platform and let you go and trust that you're going to do the right thing. We're all going to have issues and need help reeling it back in. Hell, I'm nobody. But even when I started this video platform and I'm going to expand to do everything else I wanted to do, I immediately said I wanted a producer. I still don't have one, but I immediately said I wanted a producer because I want somebody to be able to tell me that's not okay. You shouldn't say that. You shouldn't do this. Like, I want to be able to be checked. And at the end of the day, Nene doesn't feel like somebody that can be checked. So for those reasons, I wouldn't want to work with her either. So I don't know if it's a blackball thing, more so of a like, we can't do anything with her at the end of the day. You know what I'm saying? And I think that Carlos was tapping on this a little, even when he got emotional at the end and he was saying, it shouldn't be this way. And I feel like even if you sat in a room with the execs, it could be fixed because it's not that serious. But two things that irritated me with that. Carlos never asked her about the accusations that she made about, Andy and being racist and doing drugs and things like that. He never even mentioned that, right? And so to say that it's not that serious, those are serious things, right? And after you say that about somebody, again, why would they want to work with you? You know what I'm saying? It's not up to you to say now, well, I said those things about you, but we can move on. Like she said, she's like, I get mad, but then I get over it. Yeah, but you said what you said, right? And now that you said that, I don't want to work with you. We can talk past it and we can get past it, but I still don't want to work with you. You know what I'm saying? Because you're unhinged and you haven't exhibited any growth. So that was one issue I had. Carlos didn't even bring that up. And then also, he's talking about how he's friends with Nene and he knows her on a personal level, but he's talking around the issue. And you can tell he's saying like, ego's gotten away. And I feel like your personality was so big, they didn't know what to do with you. That stuff is true, but be more pointed to your friend and let her know her ego is in the way as of today. And she goes off and she says things that she should not say. He even said, people say things that they shouldn't say. No, Nene said things that she should not have said. Hold her accountable. That's why she's not growing. You literally invited her here for this 2-part interview. Y'all sat there for hours, however the hell long, and there was no growth exhibited. That's insane to me. And then you end off the thing by doing a game of star or starless. What? Like, if anything, if this was going to be something that was produced and used to jumpstart something, which is exactly what it is. We're not stupid. It should have been a reboot to Nene's career. You guys got emotional and talked about how she's not where she should be. This should have been like a revival. But instead, you guys are being messy. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like they're choosing the old way of like producing and creating a moment with negative press. Carlos even did a video or like a snippet or whatever the hell he posted talking about how many views they got. And that's just so cringy to me. You know what I'm saying? Like, this should be about Nene redeeming herself and showing that she has grown and she's in a better place. Not about look how many views that we can get based off this controversy that we've made by talking about how Candy's overrated, the show sucks, production's terrible, and who's star or starless. Like, you know what I'm saying? That's insane to me. And it was just so disappointing to see that interview end like that because it had so much potential and it really pissed me off. I'm really getting pissed off sitting here talking about it because I was really feeling for Nene in a couple moments, but it just kept going so negative and so desperate and so lame and so losery and so childish and so bitter and so disgruntled. And it's just like it's no way in hell after all these years that that's the way that this should have gone. So I'm very turned off by it. I also made a note of everybody that Nene calls starless still works in the entertainment industry ongoing at this moment. Nene does not. So you're calling these people starless, and it's just like that's not cute, Nene. Like it just feels like Nene hasn't learned anything. And at the end of the day, my very last note is Nene has never said I could have handled this better. Never. I could have handled things better. There was never that tiny bit of accountability to just push the narrative forward. It was never I could have handled things better and I'm growing and not even let me not even add to the sentence I could have handled things better. That's all she had to say. But I don't think she feels that way. And Carlos didn't hold her foot to the fire for that. They were too busy spending 30 minutes talking about Candy and how it was unfair to the viewers that we didn't get a sit down with her and Phaedra. Be for real. Come on now. Like, I just. And that's what messed up the show. So, that's how I felt about it. This was extremely long. It was not supposed to be that way. I'm trying to wrap it the hell up. But at the end of the day, where I stand is part one was really good. Part two was a disaster. And I wish Nene all the luck in the world. I feel for her. I can tell that she's hurt. And I could tell that she wanted more and still wants more. And I wish she could have it. But I said it before and I said it again. I'm going to continue to say it. She's holding herself back. And her lack of accountability and lack of self-awareness is going to continue to hold herself back. And whatever Carlos has with Roa as well and with Candy, I hope they both genuinely find peace and get over it. And again, none of what I've said today is a read. I mean this sincerely. Like, they both need to get over it and move forward and figure it the hell out.